Hello and welcome to the Anxiety Management webinar. I'm Dr. Stephanie Farrar, a clinical psychologist working in the cancer team here at Salisbury Hospital. The purpose of this webinar is to look in more detail about what is anxiety, why we experience it and what the symptoms of anxiety are, and to look at 7 key skills that you can use to help manage your anxiety more effectively. So if we start by looking at what is anxiety. Anxiety is a really normal emotion that everyone experiences at times in their life. It's our evolutionary alarm system that signals to us that something might be wrong. So in our brains we have the amygdala, which is our anxiety alarm system. It's constantly scanning the environment for threat to look at things that might hurt us or put us in harm's way. When something's detected that might be dangerous to us, the alarm system releases lots of stress hormones into the body. And the purpose of these is to get the body ready to either fight, flight or freeze. So if we think about when we first evolved as cavemen and women, if we detected that there might be a saber-toothed tiger or some other animal that might harm us, the alarm system signals in our brains, which releases the stress hormones and gets the body ready and pumped up to either fight that tiger, run away from it or freeze. So the purpose of the system is to protect us back when we were evolving and also now in day-to-day life. So when we feel anxious, there's a number of different symptoms we might experience. As I said before, stress hormones are released into the body, and the purpose of those is to get the body ready and fired up to either fight, run away or freeze. The aim of this is to get all of the blood to go to our extremities, so our hands and our feet, as that's where we need our blood supply if we're going to run or fight something. So when we feel anxious, our heart often starts pumping really, really fast, and that's to get the blood moving around the body to the places it's needed. We can also get a sick feeling in our stomach, which again is the blood coming away from the digestive system because it's not needed there in that moment of fight or flight. It's needed more in our hands and our feet. We can also go to the toilet more often because again we're going to be more effective and able to run faster if we're more empty in our bowel and bladder. We can also experience things like dry mouth because again producing saliva isn't important in that moment of fight and flight. And we can also sweat more because we're trying to release the heat that we might be feeling from our increased blood flow and heart pumping, releasing that sweat through our body to help cool us down. We often don't feel very hungry when we're anxious, and again that's because eating isn't a priority at those times. And we can also experience things like dilated pupils because we're trying to take in more information from the environment around us. Everybody experiences different symptoms of anxiety and different subsets of symptoms. So it's important to have a think about when you feel anxious, what symptoms do you experience? What are the common ones that signal to you that you're feeling anxious? So I guess the important message so far is it's okay to feel anxious. It's a normal human emotion and it signals to us that something isn't quite right or that we might be in danger. As I said, it's an evolutionary alarm system, so back when we were cavemen and women, it was very much needed in order to keep us alive. However, in the modern day society, we don't have saber-toothed tigers anymore, but it's the same anxiety response that's triggered when we might get worries about social situations or appointments or other things that might be happening in the future. So it's completely normal that you might be feeling anxious at the moment. You might be awaiting test results, you might be juggling lots of unknowns and what-ifs about your diagnosis or future treatments or surgeries. Although it's normal to feel anxious because there might be lots of unknowns in your life at the moment, anxiety can interfere with us living the life that we value. It can get to a point where we might start avoiding things or avoiding seeing people because we don't feel in control of it and we feel overwhelmed by it. If you are struggling with anxiety to the point that it's impacting on your life, it might be helpful to use some of the skills we're going to go through now in order to manage the anxiety more effectively. It's important to notice that it's not possible to get rid of our anxiety because, like we said, it's signalling to us that we're uncertain at the moment or going through difficult times, but there are strategies we can use to help manage it more effectively so it impacts on our life less. So we're now going to go through 7 skills to help manage anxiety. Skill number 1 is breathing exercises. So as we said before, anxiety triggers a release of adrenaline, which is that stress hormone, into the body, which triggers our flight or fight response. Adrenaline very much triggers the arousal system, which fires the body up, ready to act. But we can use breathing exercises to help calm down that arousal system, which sends a message back to the brain to say, I'm okay, I'm safe, I don't need to feel this anxious. A really good breathing exercise is rectangle breathing. This one's helpful because wherever you are in life, there's normally a rectangle in the environment that you can use as a point of reference. For example, our phones, windows, doors, pictures on the wall, laptops in front of us, they're all a rectangle shape. So what you do with this breathing is you start at the top left-hand corner of the rectangle. And you start by taking a big breath out. And the reason we take a big breath out to start with is because it helps release any excess oxygen we have in our system. When we feel anxious, we often take fast, shallow breaths, which brings lots of oxygen into the system, which increases the production of adrenaline, which fires up the system. We therefore want to start by taking a big breath out in order just to try and calm the system and reduce the amount of oxygen in the body. After we've taken a long breath out, we then go down the side of the rectangle and we take a shorter breath in. Then we go down the bottom and take a longer breath out again. And then a shorter breath in, and then we keep going round. So the general pattern is short breath in, long breath out. What can be really helpful with this is to put a number on the breath in and out to ensure the one in is slightly shorter than the one out. So for some people, the breath out might be 5 and the breath in might be 3. All depends on your capacity and what's possible, but just make sure the in-breath is shorter than the out-breath. So what I encourage you to do now is just think about a number for each of those and just go with me around the rectangle just to practice this breathing. So we're going to start at the top left with a breath out. And then a short breath in. And a longer breath out. And a short breath in. And a longer breath out. And what you would do in practice is you'd keep going around this rectangle for several minutes because it can take that amount of time just to calm the system. So it just helps stabilise our breathing and stops us taking fast, shallow breaths. And also, as you're counting around the rectangle and picturing a rectangle, it also helps distract your mind, which helps push those anxious thoughts that are feeding that threat system just back a bit in your mind, which can again help just calm down the arousal system and help you feel a bit more in control of your anxiety. Skill 2 is progressive muscle relaxation. So similar to breathing, progressive muscle relaxation tries to activate the calming system in the body, which again, if we can feel a bit calmer, that can send the signal back to that evolutionary brain response to say, I'm okay, I'm safe, and it just calms down the arousal system. So this is something similar to breathing you can do anywhere. Although you can do it lying down, you can also do it while you're sitting down as well. And the purpose of this is to tense every muscle in the body one by one, really, really tight, and then let it go. And what you're doing is, one, when you're tensing it really tight, you're noticing what it feels like for the muscle to be tense. But also, as you then release it, you're forcing the body to relax. So if you're holding tension in that area of the body, you're forcing it to relax, which again helps calm the arousal system and reduce those feelings of anxiety. So we're going to do a few together now, just to demonstrate. So I often start with the feet. So if you sit with your feet flat on the floor, and then if you take your feet to start with and tense them, really, really screw them up, really, really tight. Keep going for 1, 2, 3, 4, and then release. And just feel what it feels like when you release them. And then move up to your calf muscles. And again, in both legs, really, really squeeze them as tight as you can, really scrunching them. 1, 2, 3, 4, and release. And then do the same with your thighs. Really squeeze them, really, really tight for 1, 2, 3, 4, and release. And what you do is you continue doing that with every muscle group, moving up your torso, your hands, your arms, chest and face, really scrunching for 3 or 4 seconds and then releasing. And then once you've done that once, you might do it again a couple of times, because every time you do it, it just helps relax the body that bit more. And like I said, that can help calm the arousal system and just send those signals back to the brain to say, it's okay, and that helps calm the system. This can be really helpful if you experience anxiety before going to bed. So doing this as you're lying in bed trying to drift off to sleep can be helpful, because again, it just helps release that tension in the body, helps relax the body, and often you don't get to the end of the exercise before you drift off. So it can be really helpful if that's when you start to feel quite tense and anxious in the day. And similar to breathing, as well as relaxing the body, it's also a good form of distraction, because as you're focusing on each muscle group and counting as you tense and release, again, those anxious thoughts that are feeding that response are just pushed back a little bit in your head, which again just gives you a little bit of distance from them, which helps the system calm. What's also really good with breathing and relaxation is they can be done anywhere. So you could do them in a waiting room, you could do them when you're on a bus, and people don't know you're doing it, so it's a skill that you can take anywhere with you. If breathing relaxation is something that you think might be helpful to you, we've got some resources here from NHS sites that you could go to that have some guided breathing and relaxation strategies that you can use. Sometimes when you're starting to use breathing relaxation, it can be helpful to have guided videos or recordings, because that can help remind you of what to do. Skill number 3 is distraction. So we've touched on distraction with breathing relaxation, but what it is it's redirecting the mind to other things, preferably enjoyable. So it's moving away from unhelpful thinking at unhelpful times. So as we know, when we're anxious, we don't just get one anxious thought. We tend to get 10 or 20 at a time, and our mind gets really, really busy. And the more thoughts we have, the more anxious we can get. And then the more of those bodily sensations we might experience. So when we notice that we've got lots of anxious thoughts swimming around our heads, that might be about upcoming appointments or upcoming events that are causing us to feel uncertain or worried about things. When we notice that we've got those thoughts, it can be helpful to try and redirect our attention somewhere else. It's not possible to get rid of those anxious thoughts, because like we said in the beginning, they're signalling to us that we're struggling with something, that we're feeling uncertain or out of control of something in our life. So they're important thoughts that we can't get rid of, but sometimes we need to try and unhook from them a little bit and attend to something else just to push them back in our brain a little bit, so they're not at centre focus and they're not driving that anxiety response so much. So anything can be distracting. They can be physical things like going for a walk or calling someone or engaging in a hobby or an interest you might have. So doing a puzzle or doing some sewing or cooking. Could be watching TV, listening to music. Often it's helpful to listen to upbeat music when we're feeling anxious. It could be talking to a pet. So if you notice that you're sitting or standing somewhere and you're experiencing lots of anxious thoughts, I encourage you to turn your attention to something else. Go and do something that physically distracts you and takes your attention somewhere else, even if it's just for a short term, just to give you a break from those worries and anxiety. If you're in a situation where you can't physically get up and do something to distract your attention, you can do mental distraction. So these can be really helpful strategies, again, when you're in a waiting room or you're on a bus or in a situation where you can't get up and move. And 2 good mental distractions can be naming and counting. So naming distraction is where you take a topic and you use the alphabet. So for example, you might choose flowers and then you name 3 flowers beginning with A, 3 flowers beginning with B and C and D and so on. Or if you're into cars or food or drinks, you do the same. So you name 3 foods beginning with A, then B, then C, or animals. Any kind of categories that you know something about and you go through. And the purpose of that is that as you're thinking of 3 animals beginning with A, and so on and so forth, you're again just pushing those anxious thoughts back a little bit in your mind because you're focusing on something else. The same with counting. So pick a number like 400 and count back in threes. So again, you'd have 400, then you'd have 397, and so on and so on. And again, you're mentally focusing on counting backwards. So those anxious thoughts are still there, but they're just pushed back a little bit, which again helps us manage that arousal system slightly better and helps calm it. Skill 4 is planning and pacing. So planning and pacing is important because when you're experiencing a lot of uncertainty, it can be helpful to focus on the things that you can control. We as humans like to have some predictability and elements of control in our life, and when we're experiencing physical health difficulties that involve lots of treatment appointments or just lots of appointments generally, it can feel as though we're out of control of our life day to day and week to week. So if you find you're in this situation, it can be helpful to identify pockets of time in your day where you do have the ability to control what you do. And then use those times to plan in activities that give you a sense of achievement and enjoyment. They could be things like reading or gardening. If you do this, it is also important to remember pacing. If you're struggling from fatigue because of your physical health difficulty, it's important not to overload those pockets of time that you have, otherwise you'll further reduce your energy levels. So it's important to plan in rest or sleep periods if needed. So it might be that you do some gardening, but for only 20 minutes at a time and have a 10-minute rest in between to help manage that fatigue. It can also be helpful to keep a record of your energy levels so you notice the times that you have more energy, and that's when you might do the more active activities. It's also important not to just put in activities that give you a sense of achievement, such as gardening and cleaning, but also ones that give you enjoyment. Because when we're feeling anxious and overwhelmed, it's important to connect with the things that are important to us. So that might be seeing someone, it might be doing some reading or watching your favourite TV programme. It might also be helpful to use an activity schedule like this one on screen, and this can just help you pace more effectively. So it's helpful to put in the activities that you're going to do or the appointments that you have and put in the rest periods either side of those. This can also help you track what you're doing and whether you've got a good balance between that sense of achievement and sense of enjoyment, and to rectify that if you find the balance isn't quite right. Skill 5 is worry time. So as we said before, worries are completely normal, especially when we're experiencing difficult things in our lives, but they can overtake our attention and feel all-encompassing when we experience a lot of them day to day. So this skill called worry time can be really useful at helping to manage the anxiety and set some boundaries with those worries. So the idea here is not to get rid of worries, because worries are important and they're our brain's way of signalling that something isn't right, but it's to be able to manage them more effectively so they impact our day and levels of anxiety less. So what you do with worry time is, as worries come up during the day, you write them down. So that could be with pen and paper, or it could be on your phone. So you don't need to write the full worry out if it's a long one, but you just write the main highlights of it so that you can remember what was it about. So you write them down, your pen and paper on your phone, and then you let it go and carry on with your day. If the worry comes back, you just note to yourself that you've written it down and that you'll deal with it later, and you keep writing any other new worries that come along during the day. Then what you do is you have a set scheduled worry time each day. So not too close to bed, so it might be 5 o'clock in the evening, where you sit down and you allocate about 20 minutes to go through all the worries that you've written down. It can be a good idea here to set a timer on your phone for 20 minutes so that you keep this worry time boundaried. And what you do is, as you take each worry, you use the worry decision tree. So you start at the top, you notice the worry, so you take the first one, you say, what am I worrying about? So you read what the worry was about, and you ask yourself, is this a problem I can do something about? If it is, then you ask yourself, can I do it right now? The answer might be no, because it might be ringing up about a bill or an appointment that you've got and the phone lines are closed because it's 5 o'clock. So you say no, but you schedule it in. So you say, right, but I'll do that tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning when I've got some space. If it's something you can do right now, then you do it. So if it's a worry about speaking to a friend or arranging something, you might give them a call or you might send them a text message and you get that worry sorted. Then you let the worry go because you've done something about it or you've scheduled it. More commonly, the worries might be the other side of the tree. So is this a problem I can do something about? If that's a no, you take a breath. You might do a little bit of the rectangle breathing and you let the worry go. So what you're doing there is you're noticing the worry. So it might be a worry about some test results that you're due to get in a few weeks' time. Is there anything you can do about those? No, because it's just about waiting for them. So you notice that you're worried about that. You validate, I'm worried about that. It's understandable I'm worried about that. Because again, we know that that's signalling we're worried, we're feeling unsure about something. It's normal to feel anxious and worried about that. You take a breath, which just helps calm that arousal system. Do a bit of rectangle breathing if you're feeling very anxious, and then let the worry go and move on to the next worry. And what you'll find is some worries every day will keep reoccurring, and that's okay. So those ones about a test results coming up in a few weeks' time, you're probably going to experience them every day, multiple times a day. It's just noticing they've come up, noting them down, and again, giving them that space within worry time to have a think about them, to have a bit of a worry about them, and then let them go. And the idea with worry time is if you do that every day consistently, over time you become more boundaried with your worries. So you notice quicker when your mind's been overtaken by worries. So those periods of times where you might be sat there for 5 or 10 minutes thinking about worries over and over. You notice more quickly when those worries are present, and you're able to note them down and move on from them. So what happens day to day is your attention is overtaken by worry for a shorter amount of time because you have worry time, which is your designated time to think about your worries and come up with solutions if possible. Skill number 6 is the stress bucket. So this is a really helpful skill at any point in your life. And the idea here is that we all have a stress bucket because life is stressful. So we all have a bucket, which may or may not look like this bucket here. It might look different. It might be a different colour. And the idea is that day to day drips come into our bucket because life is stressful. It could be traffic, it could be other people, it could be work, it could be bills, all sorts of things. So every day drips come into our stress bucket and start filling it up. And normally, when we're at a kind of relatively stable point in our life, our stress bucket will always float around a relatively stable level. So that might be half full, it might be slightly higher, it might be slightly lower, depending on the kind of life that you normally have. And we normally have a relatively stable stress level. And that's because although life is stressful and things drop in every day, we have this tap at the bottom, which is turned on enough to let some drips out. The drips come in every day, but we also have drips coming out of the tap, which just helps that level stay stable in our bucket. However, when we experience big life events like a health diagnosis and or treatment, or other big things in our life like relationship breakdowns, changes in jobs, having children, the drips still happen every day, but we also tend to get this jug that puts a big pour in. So if you think about health diagnosis, that's quite a big amount of water that got poured in when that diagnosis happened. And then surgery and medical appointments pour in even more in a short space of time. And what happens is the level's going to go up because it's not just the normal drips that are coming in. We've got these jugs coming in as well, and maybe a couple at a time. So the level's going to go up. And when the level goes up, especially if it goes up quite fast, we tend to forget about the tap at the bottom. So we forget to turn the tap on more to keep up with the amount coming in, or sometimes the tap completely shuts off because we're just so overwhelmed because our level's rising. And then what can happen is as the level keeps going up and things keep coming in and the tap's not working very well, we can get right to the top of the bucket, or we can overflow and go over the edges. And that tends to be those situations where the straw broke the camel's back, where a small trigger, something small potentially happened, and we just had this quite big reaction to it, and we think, oh my goodness, what was that about? That tends to be signifying that our bucket is very, very high or overflowing. So it's important to think about what fills up your stress bucket. It could be things that are going on at the moment, but also other things in your life alongside that, because things don't happen in isolation that fill up your stress bucket. Have a think about those things. So we then think about, okay, we've got this stress bucket. we've got things in our life that might be making the level increase. What can we do about it? One thing to notice is that we can't always control the water that's coming into the bucket. So like I said, that's stressful things every day. That might be things to do with our health that we can't control. It might be things to do with other people. So focusing a lot on what's coming in isn't always helpful, because a lot of those things are out of our control, which is what makes them stressful and what causes us to feel overwhelmed and anxious. So there's two things we can do, or that we can focus on to help. One is our early warning signs. So it's thinking, as that water level in my stress bucket is rising, what symptoms do I tend to get to signify that I'm going up, and that it might be getting close to the top or going over the sides? So they tend to be our early warning signs. And common ones tend to be things like not sleeping as well, spending more time feeling overwhelmed, having more anxious thoughts, maybe eating differently, so maybe eating less or eating more, being more snappy or frustrated with ourselves or others around us. Could also be things like relying on coping strategies that aren't overly helpful, so drinking more alcohol or smoking more. So have a little think about, what are your early warning signs that your stress level, so your water level, is rising? Because if we can notice those, we can sometimes turn our attention to strategies that might be helpful a bit quicker and stop ourselves getting to the top or overflowing. The second bit we can intervene is the tap. So we can focus on the taps. Like we said, we can't always change what's coming into the bucket, but we can look at the tap and think, is my tap on? Does it need to be turned on more? What kind of things do I need to do to help alleviate some of that stress and bring down that water level? So at the tap level, we're looking at stress management strategies. So it could be some of the things we've looked at already today, like breathing, relaxation, scheduling in time to do that. Using distraction in really stressful situations to help manage how we're feeling a bit more effectively. It could be re-engaging with enjoyable activities to get a sense of fun and distraction. So you might notice, as the water level goes up, one of your early warning signs is you tend to not do hobbies or see people that give you a sense of enjoyment. So it's re-engaging with those that helps us de-stress. Connecting with others. We tend to be social animals, but when we're feeling overwhelmed, we tend to retreat. So noticing that and engaging with others around us that, again, bring us that sense of fun and relaxation. It could also be that you're someone that's always struggled with your stress bucket and never really had a very functioning tap and never really developed any kind of effective stress management strategies. So part of a tap move for you might be to get some professional support, get some one-to-one support or therapy to help look at what factors cause you to feel stressed and what strategies you could use to help you manage it more effectively. So have a think about your stress bucket, have a think about your early warning signs and what strategies you use or might need to develop further in order to help manage your levels of stress. So the final skill number 7, is self-compassion. So self-compassion is noting that it's important to be kind to yourself. We're not very good at being kind to ourselves. We're often very good at being kind to others, but not when it comes to ourselves. So it's acknowledging that you're going through a very difficult time and that it's understandable that you're going to feel anxious, that you're going to feel overwhelmed. And unfortunately, when we feel overwhelmed and anxious, our mind tends to be very self-critical. So it tends to say things like, I should be coping better. I'm not strong enough. I'm not coping as well as so-and-so who's going through the same thing. And it's interesting because we often don't say those things to other people in our lives. We tend to be very compassionate towards them. So when we're trying to be a bit more self-compassionate, it's about catching those self-critical thoughts, catching that we're feeling anxious and then noticing, am I also being self-critical towards myself and saying I'm not doing good enough, I should be coping better. And if that is the case, it's just trying to reframe those self-critical thoughts so they're more gentle and they're more compassionate. So it's not saying you're doing amazingly, but it's just softening it and saying it, I'm doing the best I can. I'm struggling at the moment, but I'm trying to move forward. So it's just trying to make it slightly more gentle, and that helps reduce the increased distress that we might be feeling when we're already feeling anxious and overwhelmed. If you struggle to make those statements, those self-critical thoughts a bit softer, ask yourself, what would I say to a friend experiencing the same thoughts and emotions as I am now? You probably wouldn't say the self-critical thoughts you're saying to yourself to a friend. So just try and turn it around and then say that slightly softer statement to yourself out loud. And that can just help increase that self-compassion and just reduce some of that extra distress or anxiety around the situation. So alongside these 7 coping skills for anxiety, it's also important to look after the basics. So it's important to get regular exercise. If you've got limitations kind of physically, exercise doesn't have to be huge. It can just be a slow walk or some stretching, any form of movement. It's also important to prioritise sleep and get some support if you're struggling with sleep. And also to try and eat a healthy, balanced diet as much as possible. If we can get our levels of exercise, sleep and diet relatively stable, that gives us a good natural resilience level. And then the skills that we've talked about today help build on top of that to help us manage ongoing stress and worry. The other thing to say is that all the skills we've gone through today take a lot of practice before they work. So they're not going to work the first time you use them. So it's important to practice every day. It's also important not to try all 7 skills at once, because that's going to be overwhelming and probably add to your levels of anxiety. So I'd recommend take 2 or 3 skills at a time. Think about which ones might be most effective for you and just practice them every day. So if that's breathing, try and practice rectangular breathing when you're not feeling anxious to start with. So then it becomes more routine and more natural for you when you do feel anxious. Use the skills daily, like I said, and then after a couple of weeks, review how they're working for you. If you think some are working better than others, you can swap some out for the other 7 and play with different ones and see which ones suit you best. On this slide, we just wanted to signpost to a number of different community services that can help support you with lots of different topics if you'd find them helpful. So please have a look at those if you're not aware of them, as there might be something there that can offer you further support if needed. And finally, just wanted to make sure you're aware of the Cancer Support Worker team here at Salisbury Hospital, who are a group of professionals available to offer you emotional, practical support around your cancer diagnosis, treatment and beyond. So if there's anything that you need any support with, please do contact your cancer support worker on the number below. If you don't know who your specific cancer support worker is, that doesn't matter. Just ring the general number and they can help get you in touch with the right person. They can also help you access more formal support for anxiety or any other psychological difficulty you might be experiencing linked to your cancer diagnosis. So please do contact them to discuss this further if needed. If this is the case, you can be referred to the psychology team here at Salisbury Hospital, or they can signpost you to some community services that might be able to support you. Thank you for listening today. I hope you found it helpful and you're able to use the skills going forward. If you want any more information on the skills or any handouts related to them, please do contact your cancer support worker and they'll be able to send these for you.